The death of George Floyd, a black American at the hands of police, this time in Minneapolis, sparking outrage and protests across the country. We talked to local law enforcement, the NAACP, and a local mayor in our region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Here in Connecticut, protesters have taken to the streets of many cities this week, venting their frustration and anger at what is being seen as continued police brutality towards the black community and racism in the country as a whole. Joining us is Jean Jordan, president of the New London branch of the NAACP, also Mayor Michael Passero of the City of New London, and Chief Peter Reichard and Captain Brian Wright, both of New London Police Department. To all of you, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Of course, we're talking about the tragic death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. Jean, I want to put the first question to you. You're seeing the pictures, like all of us, in the media of the protests and also the violence which has also started up since the death of George Floyd. What's your take on all of this, and what is the community saying to you about it?
Well, first of all, we were shocked, but then we weren't shocked because it's something that we have become used to, and that's sad. We should not become used to shootings, murders like this that took place with George Floyd. I mean, there's a long history of them going back to Amadou Diallo in New York City. I mean, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, who wasn't by a police officer, but it's time for it to stop. We know that there's an element, and it's like 1 to 5% that are doing wrong. And we don't want those people within our police departments. And the community feels the same way.
I want to turn now to Mayor Michael Passero. Your thoughts, obviously, on the situation, Mayor?
Well, it's tough for somebody my age because, I'm 64, and it just frustrating that we're making such little progress. It just seems like we're stuck in the same time warp, and we go through this again and again and again, the cycle of violence. It's sad. I went back and I listened to Robert Kennedy's speech in Indianapolis in 1968, and it was hours after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And, that was a moment of extreme political heroism because in those days, news hadn't traveled fast. The crowd there had not heard that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And Bobby Kennedy's team strongly advised him not to go into the crowd, but he did. And he informed them, of the assassination. And his words then in 1968 just reverberate today, and it's 52 years later. So it's just so striking how little progress we've made. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating for me. I think it's frustrating for a city like New London. And, we're going to get through this, but I can hear the frustration, and I think the clock's running out on us.
I want to turn now to Police Chief Reichard. Of course, the police are center stage in this. It is, of course, not something that we expect from our law enforcement, and it reflects on all law enforcement across the country. How far has this set back police and public trust, do you feel?
Looking at this, I'd say this sets us back decades. The trust that we've been working on in the community, the partnerships we've formed with our different allies in the community, we're being painted a picture of what happens in Minneapolis happens in every city every day of the year. We know in New London it doesn't happen here. We're proactive in everything we do to work with our community. Our motto is New London Police Department is your partner in the community. That's what we're trying to convey to everybody. One action which can't be tolerated by any chief of police in the country or the world is affecting the whole nation. Just look what's taking place right now due to the fact that this has become public. I will not condone any type of action like that. And I don't think any chief of police or any police officer in the country condones it either. it's intolerable, and I can't imagine an officer would intentionally do that. It's just disgusting.
I want to turn to Captain Wright, and thank you for that, Chief. We're seeing escalating violence at some of these protests. Tuesday in Rhode Island, a police vehicle set on fire, damage to a shopping mall. Earlier in the week, New Haven police had to use pepper spray to disperse protesters who wanted to gain access to the police station. Their intent, of course, not fully understood. It's being said that many of these involved in these acts are not necessarily from the respective states, but outsiders. Do you and the New London police have concerns or any form of intelligence that's coming in your direction that New London or other nearby areas could be targeted next?
No, only data or intel that we have is what we've been seeing. There's nothing that's come across that leads us to believe that is the case here. However, we're always on high alert, and we want to ensure everyone's safety. We understand and respect the right, freedom of speech, and individuals' right to protest. We just want to ensure everyone's safety that's involved.
Gene, earlier this week, your branch of the NAACP and the New London Police, had a Zoom call. Both of you took the initiative to have that. How did you feel that went? And one of the things that did seem to come out of it was a resonating sort of topic, was basically accountability.
I have heard good things about what we did, and I have heard bad things. You can't please everyone, and if you're pleasing everyone, you're not doing your job. Accountability is a big issue, and I will have to say this year there's been some incidents regarding students, and Captain Wright has been there front and foremost, basically throwing himself on the sword in front of these parents, to give the police department that accountability. And we really appreciate that. But, like I said, what the community, they don't want to hear, they want to see. I hear from people, they're tired of hearing the talk, but now they want to see the walk. So it's what the police department does that is what people are going to be looking at, not at what they say, but what they do.
I want to get back to obviously both the chief and Captain Wright, to answer not only to that comment there from Gene, but also the training of officers. My understanding, and please correct me here, but it's my understanding that there isn't actually any national training standards for the 1,800 law enforcement agencies across the US. If there was, in fact, national training standards, do you think that would be one way in helping to, one, obviously get some balance in how training is actually given to police officers just generally, but also it might weed out some of these bad actors who are actually in the various police forces?
That's a good question. I tell you this, although there may not be any national standards of what is permissible, there's definitely standards of what is not acceptable. And without hesitation, what was seen in Minneapolis is unacceptable. I believe transparency is monumental. It's important that the public hears from its respective police departments speak out when injustice rears its ugly head. We can't expect our community to hold our legitimacy if we don't speak out for what is right, even if the price of saying it is high. Fortunate in New London, we don't always have an answer, but we strive to get and be in one step with our community. I always say that it's not a race, it's a marathon, slowly but surely, but we challenge, and we have to be challenged to hold our line and be accountable for what happens, regardless of how major or how minute. It's important that we're held to a standard by our community, and we're challenged to maintain those standards.
I think, Brian, it goes above just the standard by the community. The department has a standard, and the department will not allow its employees to go outside of that standard. We are a respected police department in the state. We've come up with some very, very strong policies over the years that we follow, to the point where other agencies in the region have actually duplicated and replicated our policies for use of force and investigation of use of force. So we have set standards, and we require, as supervisors of the police department, that our employees, our officers, will operate within those standards, and they will treat everybody with respect and dignity in the community while they're doing their job.
Let me put this to both of you as well. The training of officers at the very beginning of their careers at police academies, do you think that that has to change as well? Because, there's that old line where we've always done it this way, and that's possibly some of the most damaging words that you can hear in any organization when people are decide that they're not going to change how they do things. The training is very extreme. It has to be because of the tough job, obviously, that ultimately police officers have to deal with. But it does seem very militaristic. It does seem very sort of, we're going to sort of like basically take you down to build you back up. And I wonder if that may be part of the problem, is that maybe the training needs to change to reflect society and how we deal with people.
I think it's important to provide options and keep training fluid and current. We can't rely on what worked before or previously. We have to always be in search of and looking for better ways to do things. When you limit the possible options or you just reduce the amount of training, I think that's where the problem exists. But providing individuals with de-escalation techniques, making sure they understand the importance of communication, active listening, which I think a lot of times people don't necessarily employ, which is so important, because when you actively listen, it's easier to find a solution or come with a host of options which reduce the risk of all those involved.
What about also social training, Captain Wright? I mean, you train in all these various other scenarios. I mean, there is a lot that police officers have to go through. I don't think anyone is questioning that. But social training is like a term that I've come across where, that seems to be a different type of training, because that is very much, this one-on-one, face-to-face understanding how to deal with people. And also, if we look at the way that you have evolved as a force, certainly here in this part of Connecticut, we see that, there are programs now on where police officers get trained on how to deal with people who have autism, etc. So, this social training aspect, do you think that that is something that really needs to be highlighted and again could help to make future police officers understand how they need to conduct themselves?
Absolutely. One of the additional things that we're fortunate to have here in the city of New London is CIT, crisis intervention training. We were one of the first agencies in the Northeast to be certified and have officers trained in that, and we rely on that considerably. Our goal is to have as many officers, if not all, trained in that aspect, because it allows an advantage to an officer which carries over not just to crisis situations, just with any situation. That active learning aspect, I just can't say how important and reliable it is. And to let the community know that we are ready to listen and be able to listen. And just to refer back to what Gene said, talk the talk, but also be willing to walk the walk. I think that's incredibly important as well.
One thing I want to ask both of you is about police body cameras. It's become very much a hot topic as well. I believe that New London possibly has dash cam, but like actual personal body cameras is not something that you currently have. Why is that, and when are you going to get it? Because there are other police forces here in the locality that do have it. I understand that Waterford is going to be getting them. I believe that Groton already has them. So what is the situation with you and personal police body cameras?
Presently, all of our marked vehicles are equipped with dashboard cameras and body mics for the officers when they're conducting motor vehicle stops. Just last night at a city council meeting, the city council approved the mayor to sign an acceptable contract between the Axon Corporation and the new city of New London for a body-worn camera program that is going to be instituted here in the city. Everyone says, why is it taking so long to get there? We had funding set aside in a couple of years back in the former mayor's administration. Fortunately, it was just being rushed to get it done just for the sake of getting it done. At the time, there was too many unanswered questions about the systems, how they operate, the cost of it, the technology, and redaction of videos. In the last year and a half, things have changed dramatically. As technology changes, so does the body cameras that officers wear. They continue to change and move forward. And we believe that the product that we marketed for the police department, the officers like the product, that this is what's going to work best for the city. And we will be moving forward within the next few months, once the contract is signed, with the infrastructure on our facility for the equipment and then infrastructure in the vehicles to be replaced, and we will be rolling out body-worn cameras for all officers in the department. From the chief right down to the recruit out of the academy, everyone will be issued a body camera, and everyone will be working under a policy that is released by the department.
How do you feel personally, Chief, about these? And also, Captain Wright, you can answer this as well. I mean, body cameras, as I say, have become very much a hot topic for law enforcement. There was an overhaul of part of the law enforcement sort of like bill here in Connecticut last year because of some unfortunate, very unfortunate incidences in the western part of the state that again involved police and shootings. So that certainly when it comes to body cameras now, that footage has to be released very, very quickly and to the public. So how comfortable are you about that, and is that the right way to go?
Transparency is everything. That's one of the reasons why we're going with body-worn cameras. So we'll have the ability to release a video of what the officer saw. So you'll be in the position the officer was in when everything took place, and it won't be a 10-second clip from a cell phone video or a surveillance camera video that doesn't actually put you in the position where the officer was in. And it's not going to, the videos are not going to be enhanced in any way. This is what it is. This is what the officer saw. This is what the officer may have heard at the time it took place. Personally, I wish there was cameras around for the last 30 years that I've been a police officer, because I would have had one on the whole time. I've seen fraudulent complaints filed against police officers over the years where nothing really took place, but there was no evidence to show that nothing took place. I've seen police officers who've gone overboard that had to be stopped, and this will actually show, a body camera on them would show what they actually did and how they violated policy, and they should have been dealt with for that. I believe that when we put body cameras on officers, at times people in the public will probably clean up their act a little bit because they'll realize that they're being videotaped, and the officers wearing the body cameras will do things the right way, the way they're supposed to be doing it, the way they've been trained, because they know they are being recorded. And there's a mechanism in place where supervisors will be doing random audits to view videos that have been filmed by the police department.
When this does actually, come into fruition, the police body cameras, I mean, again, one of the big complaints about some of these situations which have involved police in the past across the nation is that they either don't get, justice is not served, or that footage is not made available, and therefore the police officers, are not either prosecuted or they're not, challenged in any way. And of course, that just further erodes not only accountability but trust as well. How easy or hard is having body cameras going to make it to be able to single out rogue officers and actually get them off of the force? Because again, I suppose that's another big issue for people, is they don't always see action quick enough. We've seen it certainly quicker here this time with the tragic death of George Floyd, but in the past this hasn't always been the case, has it?
I think the benefit of having a comprehensive policy which covers and sets standards and high guidelines is imperative. What we've seen with this misfortune in Minneapolis is the fact that there was video footage from the onset to the conclusion, which was allowed for a more swift resolution to the problem, the arrest of that particular officer. So many times situations come about where you just have parts and pieces of the incident, and it's so easy to line, well, it's uncaptured what happened before. But in this situation, when you're able to see from the onset to the conclusion, there's no argument, no refuting the facts. And I think that's going to be key. And with body cams, with a comprehensive policy and guidelines, I think that will offer a better situation for both our community and officers to act under, because they're on notice right from the beginning.
Gene, from the point of view of, you're an organization, obviously, that looks after people's rights. How do you feel, obviously, about the body camera issue? And do you think it goes far enough in helping a situation?
I was there 5 years ago when it was signed into place here in New London, and we had constant conversations regarding where are we at with it and what are the reasons why we don't have it. And so I've been part of the process. I have had the privilege of seeing both dash cam video and body cam video, and it does change the conversation when you're able to see something from different points of view. In case of the body cam video, I saw three different points of view. It was from three different police officers, and what we were told, how something went down, and what we saw were actually two different things. I won't say it was a fraudulent complaint because the person felt the way they did, but there were two people involved, and you can see the way both people reacted, and it was just like, this is a no-brainer. This is not what they're saying happened. You can see it. And I could say that because I did see it from three different body cams. The dash cam I saw was actually a police officer doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And everyone who saw it said, yeah, we all saw the same thing. It was not good. But in firing police officers, it's not just about firing, it's about making sure they don't keep their certification so that they can go to another department and do the same thing. We found in the last 10 years, a lot of the police officers who have been involved in these shootings, not only have they had numerous complaints, but they may have also been worked at more than one department. So that's a big issue, is making sure they don't keep that certification so they can go to another department. When a teacher loses her certification, she can't work as a teacher anyplace else. And the same thing should be for police officers.
I don't know if Captain Wright or Chief Reichert want to answer to that. Certainly that has been something that's been brought up in the past. I believe, again, and correct me here, that the officer involved in the death of George Floyd, his own record was colourful, to say the least, with regards to his previous behaviours. So, again, why is it so difficult, to remove these officers if they are showing signs of bad behaviour?
We work under the police officer standard training in the state of Connecticut, post-certification. A number of laws have been put into place in the last number of years to try to just what we're talking about, to try to prevent this from taking place. If a police officer, a certified police officer, is dismissed from one agency and applies for a job at another agency, by law, we are required to provide any type of investigations to anyone doing a background on that, on why they left on their own or why they were terminated. When we do recruitment in New London and we look for certified officers, one of my big red flags is, why did this guy work in so many different agencies? What's going on? There's got to be something taking place that we're not hearing, that we look a little bit deeper into. Because good officers have a good long career in one steady environment. There has to be some reason why they would flip-flop department to department. And my guess is it might be the disciplinary process in some cases. So I bypass that officer. I'm not going to waste my time spending any more money on a background investigation on whether the greatest person in the world, greatest guy or gal in the world. There's red flags in place, and we will bypass that, and we will look for another candidate to hire from the New London Police Department, which Captain Wright is one of my key ingredients in our hiring here. His position, he works with our training division in the hiring and a number of the testing processes, and I trust the judgment of my command staff when it comes to the people. The last step in our hiring process is that background investigation, to sit on my desk with a one-on-one with the officer doing the background and their commanding officer and talk about this candidate. And then we'll call that candidate in, and there'll be about an hour and a half interview with that person about expectations and their philosophies on how policing is done and what they do in their lives.
I think one of the major additions agencies have been progressive in. There used to be an equation in which you would look at, you send someone through training, you get them through the academy, and they're out on FTO, and there seems to be issues or red flags. It was, in past, it was looked at, okay, we have a large amount of money invested in an individual, let's get them through. But I think we have progressed to the point where agencies in municipalities and cities and towns have looked at it. It's not worth it, it's not beneficial to cut losses and let a person go. And I think that speaks volumes of current leadership and the way cities and towns are moving towards looking at, you can either pay now or pay later. So it's easier to get these individuals that may display red flags early on and just move on to the next one. And I think that's important, because no process is perfect, but I think having mechanisms instill where you can move forward and just, okay, part ways, I think that's beneficial as well.
I just want to give final word to all of you and thank you again for joining us on the Talk New London. It's a very simple question. Where do we go from here, Captain Wright?
I think more importantly is communication and active partnerships. It's imperative. There's no other way to accomplish our goals other than everyone working together. There has to be that respect and that courtesy to understand perspective and insight, because people coming from different backgrounds and different walks of life are going to have insight that I may not, or the chief may not have, or they may have. But sitting at a table and being able to discuss and work together, that's key. And not being afraid to say a mistake was made. Fess up, own up.
And Chief Reichard?
I can't agree more with Brian, right, on this. Open lines of communication, forming partnerships in the community, taking in ownership for what you do in the community. After coming to New London about 9 years ago as the deputy chief, my goal was to, work on community policing with the police department, get the officers involved in the communities, get the officers out on the beat, know people in the community, form relationships, form partnerships, rent a house in town if you're new to the department, live in town, buy a house in town, live, work, and invest is the city's motto lately. I agree with that. And the other aspect is, mistakes are going to happen. If we make a mistake, we're going to own up to the mistake. We're going to go public with it. If one of the officers does something wrong, the mistakes will be owned up to. We're not here to hide anything. If we have video camera footage that we're allowed to release under law, we will release it under law.
Mayor Passero, your thoughts on where we go from here?
I think the words of Captain Wright and Chief Reichert are spot on. I think communication is key. I think we're either the smallest community in the city in the state, or the second smallest. Going back and forth with Derby, we're densely populated. We're 28,000 people within 5 square miles. So, we have the advantage of knowing each other, and the people in this community need to get to know the officers who are policing our community. And I think that one-on-one contact and interaction is what will bring us to a level of cooperation that will help us to stand out and be that model city that I hear everybody talking about in the current debate. We want to set the standard for police-community relations.
And Jean Jordan, we started with you. We are going to give you the final word on this.
I think the mayor, Captain Wright, and the chief have all said everything, but I can add that we need to also look at legislation to make sure that we are treating everyone equally. We need to think about civilian review boards that have meat. We need to look at cities that have them that are working to see what is best fit for our town. We also, once those cameras are up and running, we need to talk about rules and regulations regarding that. Like, one of the questions that has been asked of me lately is, well, what happens if a police officer doesn't turn on the camera? So we need to make sure we have that information. And as the police chief said, make sure it's transparent so that people know. We want to see them, they're telling us what they're doing. We want to make sure we see them doing it. And we just need to keep talking. You are having rallies. Please, please, please make sure you are social distancing. And if you start to feel sick, please get tested. We have 2 crises that have intersected, and we don't need to have any more. So please, if you're at rallies, make sure you are social distancing. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for that. And again, to all of you, thank you for joining us. Let us know your thoughts, concerns, and questions, and get in touch with the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East, where you can also listen to the show again on demand. And please like, follow, and share on your social media platforms too. That's all from us. We'll catch you again next week.